Let's define those. Remember, new words, important. Okay? So let's get on the same page when we're talking about the different types of governments.
Theocracy?
Monarchy, how would you define it?
Controlled by one person.
Controlled by one, how about we call it rule by one? Okay? Oligarchy. Rule by
elite minority.
few. Okay? Actually, before we do democracy, let's do anarchy.
No control.
Rule by none. Democracy.
Rule by everybody.
Rule by majority. Right? Not ruled by everybody.
Yeah, that's right.
Only ruled by majority. Republic.
Law. Rule by law.
Is that all?
Representative form of government.
Okay.
You can have a republic without representative government.
China is a republic.
Well, many,
Iran is a republic.
Iran.
most
North Korea.
countries on the planet are actually republics. Out of 193, I think 178 are republics.
Good question. In actuality or in name? Okay. Let's see if in actuality. What is a republic? I heard rule of law and representatives. China has representatives and they have laws. And you can talk about corruption, but we've got corruption too. So, and they hold elections. Now, there's usually just one person on the ballot, and they've got to go all the way to Beijing in order to cast a vote, but nevertheless, it's a representative form of government.
Ours, ideally, is supposed to protect the minority.
Okay? How?
Well, you have the rule of law, but it's based on nation's God and natural law, which would encompass the 22 natural rights of the individual and 28 principles of what we believe liberties our forefathers adopted from philosophers of the Roman and Greek city-states. I don't understand maybe I don't understand exactly what you're trying to ask.
Trying to get the republic. Tough one, isn't it?
But what is the republic?
What kind of government are we?
A republic.
A republic.
So,
Right?
you can have a democracy.
We are a republic,
Representative government.
and I bet you at least half of you just get annoyed, and probably all of you, but at least half of you get completely annoyed when people refer to us as a democracy, right?
Oh,
We
yeah.
yell and scream and talk about how important it is. We're a republic, we're not a democracy. But let's define it.
Well,
A representative government.
Okay, representative government.
But you can have that in a democracy or a republic. But the difference between a republic and a democracy is a republic restrains the majority from hurting the minority
How?
through certain principles that you cannot cross the line. So, for example, if you get a majority that says all women over the age of 40 can be eliminated any way the state wishes, well, those women have certain rights that you cannot violate, even if the majority chooses so.
So we codify, we put in law that says that those rights exist, and so we protect the minority through a constitution, through rule of law.
And just simply narrow it down to republic is a constitutional Republican form of government.
Okay?
But a constitution can be written to say anything, not necessarily protect the rights of the individual.
So Benjamin Franklin said that a democracy is nothing more than two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for lunch. Right? So if we were to basically apply that to a republic, it would be two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for lunch, with the provision that none of the three can be on the menu. Right? So it's rule by majority. Remember, John Locke said you got to have rule by the majority. If it's not rule by the majority, then the public haven't gone that direction. You cannot be governed by a minority. Rule by majority, but protection of minorities. Okay, I've got a simpler definition than that, and I'll give it to you in a minute, but we'll stick with that for now.
What is our state constitution?
This,
Yeah.
not spelled out as clearly, but yeah, the Arizona Constitution is majority rule, and it protects the minority through the rule of law. Absolutely.
But we have said down state, and that's what one state indication, they're not the majority. But
They're the minority, and they have their own rights.
they're the minority,
They are.
but they're saying that they should be doing that.
Yeah, so the question is, do you have a natural right to go and pray before a city council?
Why not?
If that city council wants you to, what if they don't want you to?
They can vote against it.
Yeah, you don't have a natural right. None of us can walk into that council meeting and expect that we can simply walk up and say a prayer.
Well, then you go into the question of jurisdiction.
Well, even if you live in the city of Phoenix, there's got to be some order and some structure to things. So, but yes, that council can dictate who they would like to pray and who they would not like to pray. Now, they can't say, we are only going to have this particular religion say this prayer because we officially only recognize this particular sect.
That's one of the issues we can.
Obviously, they can't do that.
Just the same way, they can't say that they are obligated or forced to admit anyone to pray.
That's right. But they can allow them if they want.
Right.
If they want the Satanists to give the prayer, they absolutely can, and then they get to face the repercussions from the
rest
majority.
of the meeting.
Right?
Because it is their choice.
That's right. It's completely their choice. The Constitution outlines that when it comes to the House and Senate. The House and Senate, who makes the rules for the House and Senate? The House and the Senate. Is there any provision in the federal Constitution for impeaching or removing a senator or a representative out of office?
Not in the Constitution, but in the rules that were created by those two different entities, yes.
Well, the Constitution does state they can remove each other. There's no provision for the people to do it. So, just same thing, City of Phoenix. City of Phoenix, they can make their own rules. We've said, you are a body, you're a governing body, you're a legislative body. Are they an executive body? In Mesa, is your council an executive body?
Yes.
Who's the executive in the city of Mesa?
There. Or it could be the city manager.
City manager. That's right.
All depends on how it's configured.
Something we're gonna come up against.
Well, they,
Right now, I want to say that, and I need to know how to answer that. And they say, because the lawyer says they have to give them,
They don't.
and they can do something.
Where does it say that they have? Do you have a fundamental natural right to be able to go anywhere you want and say a prayer?
No.
Not
No.
anywhere.
You don't. Who owns the City of Phoenix council chambers?
The city, or the government of Phoenix.
Who owns it?
Citizens of the
The citizens of the City of Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
They own it.
But unless they define it.
They've put a council in there that represents them, and they've said, what the way you vote, we're going to go along with. Now, they've given them some boundaries. Got to be within this. But the way you vote, we're going to go along with. You are the caretaker of this building that we own. So, let me put it down in this way. Do you have the fundamental natural right to move from point A to point B?
Yes.
Absolutely you do. Do you have the fundamental natural God-given right to take any path that you want from point A to point B?
no.
No, because you might violate somebody else's private property rights, right? Do you have the fundamental natural right to move from point A to point B on the city of Mesa streets?
Yes.
As long as you don't violate the ordinances of those streets in Mesa.
Right. Who owns the streets?
We the people.
The people do.
But they're,
And so we as a majority say there are certain rules for driving on these roads. And if you
can't
don't
drive
follow those rules,
47 down
you
the street
cannot
in
drive on
Mesa.
these roads. You don't have a fundamental right to drive on any road you want to. It's with permission of the owners. And who are the owners? the people, and the majority of the people make the decision on how those roads are governed. Does that make sense? So, yes, you have the right to pray, but if the majority of people who own the building that you're going to pray in don't want you to pray in that building, you can't pray in the building. If you want to drive on the road without a driver's license, so it'd be just like these satanic folks saying, I want to drive on those roads without a driver's license. Sovereign citizens, right? God love them, great, fantastic. They're right, you can travel all you want. But you can't do it on our roads if you don't have a driver's license. We paid for them, they're ours. And they might say, well, our tax dollars went to it as well. Okay, great, but you are one vote out of 1 million people or whatever.
400,000.
Okay, does that make sense? Does that make sense? And that's John Locke. It's got to be by a majority. And you make these kind of decisions.
What's your definition?
Republic.
Republic.
Well, let's look at how we're living. Let's look at our behaviors, and let's see, because everybody agreed we're a republic, right? Let's take a look at how we interact with our government in Arizona, for example. Okay. How many people in Arizona? What's the population?
3.2 million.
The whole state. Whole
So
state.
we're around 6.
About 6 million, a little over 6 million, right? How many registered voters?
Probably not more than 2.5.
Get your phones out, let's Google it.
400,000?
Figure it out.
No.
It's about 2.5, 3 million.
Yeah, you're pushing, I think it's slightly over 3 million. I believe it's 3.1.
Talking about the ones that are dead too?
Is that?
No, that's only in Chicago.
How many are around the world?
Well, don't forget the
We got some
illegals.
people Googling it. Let's get it, we'll get it right.
What about the illegals?
Yeah, they're registered.
A lot of them are.
Yeah, we're kind of going the way of California on that with our
Yeah.
driver's license.
Unfortunately.
That was a faux pas by the legislature last year. The Senate was so pressed to get everything done before Easter that the last day, the 2nd of April, there was an amendment to some bill, and I don't remember all the details, but whatever happened, they lost sight of the original bill that was the driver's license bill,
Yeah.
and the Senate, the Republicans in the Senate voted for it, and when they found out that what they had done, they were chagrined because they did not realize what they had done at the time. And that's why they push each other too hard.
And yeah, what's happening here, and especially in California, they're certainly knowingly doing it in California. They're contradicting their own constitution and their own definitions, because in their law, you have to be a citizen to get a driver's license. But now they're giving driver's licenses to anybody who resides in California, and now that contradicts the definition of citizen. Did you have an answer?
Well, in 2012 was 3.1 million.
3.1 million. Voter turnout.
Half of that?
That's about 1.2 or 4,
What was voter turnout in 2012?
Well, general election or primary election?
We'll go general.
You count the double votes?
How about the triple?
I'd say 1.5 million.
Is that whatever website you found? Does that have that information?
I'm basically looking it up right here.
Voter turnout in 2012. Population, registered voters.
2012, 2,300,000.
The 2.3 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a high turnout.
2014 was 1.5.
Oh.
2014,
Yeah. Just about half that.
because it was a non-presidential. So what you said, 1.5?
Yeah, 1.5.
So let's go half that. We'll say it's like 1.9 million. How about that?
So the average?
An average voter turnout. Okay. What's the majority of 1.9 million?
95.
950,000?
600,
Why don't we just do this?
950,000.
I can do that math.
.1, .01.
Okay? What percentage is that of that?
1.6.
It's a minority.
20%.
Well, 16.6%.
That's a majority. We're talking about democracy. We look at majority. That is a majority. Good stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, if we talk about what we call centralized governance, CG, self-governance, SG, and we look at, say, North Korea, how many days out of the year does centralized governance exercise control over the government in North Korea?
365.
How many days out of the year does self-governance exercise control over government?
Zero.
That is a sad state, people of North Korea. Good thing we live in the United States.
What does CG and SG stand for, please?
Centralized governance
This one?
and self-governance.
Oh, okay.
This essentially is people in government, elected and non-elected. This is government. This is the people. Okay? How many days out of the year does our government exercise control over our government?
365.
Good or bad?
Bad.
Why are governments instituted?
To
protect
protect the natural rights of
Governments are
individuals.
instituted. They derive their powers, their just powers, from the consent of the governed, right? And they're organized to protect our rights, right? So, which day out of 365 do you not want your rights protected?
Sure. But that's not necessarily happening, but that's.
Good thing. This is a good thing. This is why we institute government. Okay? I know it feels like a bad thing, but just bear with me. Good thing. That's what we want. We want them protecting our rights.
And it's 365 on the other side.
Right now, in the United States, how often do we exercise control over centralized government?
We vote.
We vote? How often do we vote?
1 day every other year.
But also, influence is also a part of that, so it all depends as to what point you're interacting with your state and national legislature.
Now, what's interesting about that, because you're absolutely right, there's some of you in this room, by all means, you put in more than a half a day a year. Okay? But the majority of the United States, we put in a half day a year. Now, does it ever feel like our politicians don't pay attention to it?
All the time.
Of course they don't. We told them not to. We said, we want you to only pay attention to us a half a day a year, and when you do that, we only want you to pay attention to 16.6% of us. That's what we told them. That is the way that we have trained them. We have trained them when we sit there and we are on our little soccer teams and we sit there and root for our candidates and we're pushing to get them elected. That's what we're doing. We're saying, hey, this is the time. This is the time when we want you to pay attention to us. Now, what's interesting is there are many of you in this room that, by all means, you put in more than a half day a year, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's say you put in 50 days per year. That's a lot. That's a lot of work. Give me some of the activities that you're doing that 50 days out of the year when you're engaged.
We got CC meetings, we got meetings down at city council, things like that, town council.
Precinct meetings, and what are you doing at those precinct meetings? These party meetings.
Arguing.
Sitting in chairs.
Think about the majority of your activities, your political activities. They're all focused on preparing for the half day and trying to convince 16.6% of the people to agree with you. So even if you put in 50 days out of the year, it's focused on that.
I don't agree with that. If you're lobbying a politician on a piece of legislation, like Pastor was saying, that's not, you're not dealing with voting, you're dealing with legislation. That doesn't, I mean, that's not the 16.6, that might be the 1.6 or 0.16.
You're absolutely correct. I'm talking about generalities.
This piece,
But there's no question, there are some of you in the room that are doing more than focusing on those things. Absolutely. And that's what the founders envisioned. See, the founders envisioned 365 over 365, but then they also envisioned 365 over 365. These are not equal. Democracies are not equal. It's not balanced, and it fails every time. This is balanced. This is a system of balance.
That's why Tocqueville created the comment of American exceptionalism, because we the people spoke about politics on a daily basis. For other countries, you saw they didn't do that in Europe.
In fact, we were engaged. We were engaged in political activity. We were engaged in legislation, things like that.
I mean, it's up the gun, but how are you ever going to turn it back to legislation? I think it's a lost cause.
Oh no, it's not lost at all. It's a beautiful system. So this is the simple definition, by the way. Rule by balance. That's the system the founders set up. And they set it up not only balance between centralized governance and self-governance, but a balance between monarchy, oligarchy, no anarchy, democracy, and republic. Balance it all out.
So that's your definition of republic?
Rule by balance. Definition of our republic. Okay? See, the founders set up, this had never been done before. This had never been done before. They set up something so unique. This wasn't a name that you could call it.
Well, it's called the Great Experiment.
A republic was the closest thing that they had.
Closest thing.
So this definition is not necessarily a general definition of republic. This is not China.
It's not Iran either.
That's correct. We are completely unique in this balanced form of government. But it's a brilliant system. Now, whenever we talk about separation of powers, checks and balances, and if you were already aware that we have hints of monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy and republic in our government, there's one aspect that we kind of miss. And we think this is fantastic that they separated this among the government. What we forget, though, is this part. Our responsibility. We need to have balance in these things, too. How do we keep the monarchy?
By electing the right people to represent us.
Is the monarchy
Doesn't represent you.
Is the monarchy there to represent it? And do we elect a monarchy?
No, there's
But
Do we elect a president?
No.
No, we do not.
But the people that we send up there to represent us are supposed to put the checks and balances on the presidency, and currently they are not.
That's our job right there. For keeping the democracy, is electing those people. But how do we keep the monarchy? Think about living in a monarchy. Think about living under a king. What is your responsibility as a citizen to keep the monarchy? Obey the law. Absolutely. Simple. Same thing with oligarchy. That's basically the same. How do we keep the democracy? Elect the right people that are going to be there and represent us. Show up on election day half time of the year. Try to convince 16.6% of the people. When I'm talking about this, it kind of feels like I'm talking in a negative way, and the only reason I say it's negative is because this is all we do, is keep the democracy as a people overall.
Which is why we have democracy.
Which is why we have a democracy. Isn't that fantastic? So, as we were kind of developing some of this stuff a year or so ago, it finally dawned on me. I've been involved in this political stuff for about 20 years. And it's insane when I finally realized for most of that 20 years, I have been keeping the democracy. And you know what that means? I've been losing the republic. I'm a constitutionalist. I'm a strict constitutionalist. I travel all over this country teaching Making America seminar for NCCS. I've taught that seminar to 2 state legislatures. I've taught it in 47 states. I know the Constitution forward and backwards. I know the principles. I know all this stuff.
Maybe we need to get you replaced.
But exactly, because I've been keeping the democracy. I have participated in losing the republic.
Why do you think that's been that way?
Because I've learned my whole life that this is what we do in this country.